a webinar for AmeriCorps Vista leaders. My name is Andy King, and I'm a Senior Training Specialist at AmeriCorps Vista headquarters in Washington, D.C. And a number of you commented in the chat before we got started talking about what you're doing related to coaching with your Vistas and how you're doing it, and some of you were saying, I'm not sure if this is coaching, but here's some things I'm doing. So thank you all for those responses. And it's great to see that some of you, in fact, already are using coaching with your Vistas in some fashion, and others of you might be doing it and not even realize it. So I'm sure, though, that all of you have seen instances where you thought your Vistas could have done a better job, or maybe you've had Vista members come to you asking for your help or your advice or guidance in something to help them improve what it is they're doing. So all of those are potential opportunities for coaching. Let's take a look at our agenda for today. We're going to start by looking at what we mean when we talk about coaching, and we'll draw some distinctions between coaching and management practices, things like feedback. We'll consider some of the benefits of coaching, like why is it important, why we would do it. And then I'm going to outline the coaching process and talk about some important components or elements that should be a part of coaching. And then from there, I'll share some coaching models that might be helpful for you. And then I'm going to ask you to think about one specific action step that you're going to take away with you from the session that you can use to improve your coaching. And along the way, as I said, you'll have opportunities to share your experiences and ideas about coaching, if you've ever had a coach yourself, what that was like, and also what sort of coaching you're doing with your Vistas, and maybe some of the success stories that you've had. All right, so let's move on and dive right in. So you may have heard of Brené Brown. She's the author of Daring Greatly, along with other books like Dare to Lead and The Gifts of Imperfection. I like her definition of a leader, which is a leader is anyone who holds herself or himself responsible or accountable for finding potential in people and in processes. Well, since you're all Vista leaders, I figure we should start with this because this definition of a leader puts coaching right at the core of leadership. Coaching is all about helping people find their potential, and so if a leader is doing that, is getting people to their potential, then that, I think, is a really good starting point for us. All right, so as I said, coaching is central to leadership, but let's make sure that we know what we mean when we're talking about coaching. And there are lots of different views about what coaching is, and I don't want to get into a big debate about it, but I figured I should at least outline what I plan to cover in this session relative to coaching. So here are a couple definitions that we can use. First, the Center for Creative Leadership defines coaching as formal or informal conversations between a leader coach and a learner, and that's intended to improve positive changes in workplace behaviors. So this definition is specific to the workplace, and it has as its purpose positive behavior change. It also describes the coaching process as a conversation, and we all have experience with conversations, right? And it mentions that the conversations can be formal or informal, which means that coaching can take place in lots of settings, and it doesn't necessarily have to take a lot of time. So I like that definition. The next definition, the International Coach Federation defines coaching as partnering with clients in a thought-provoking and creative process to help people define personally and professionally. So it's a holistic approach. It's one that focuses on the individual and what they want to achieve. And it's a partnership in which the person being coached gets to set the direction and then they take responsibility and they're held accountable for the outcomes. And the goal here is helping the person to reach their potential. So the piece that we heard earlier from Brene Brown. So at its core, coaching is about improving performance, but it's distinct from other aspects of management. So let's take a look at some of those differences before we go any further. So we're all pretty familiar with feedback, right? In a workplace setting, feedback is a management tool that has a specific purpose, and that is to give the employee input on how well she or he is doing in performing the requirements of the job. It's often done in the context of a performance appraisal, right? The annual or the semi-annual review. So in that context, the manager is looking at the job requirements, the performance goals, and then comparing the employee's recent performance to those standards. And the feedback can cover what went well and what could have been better, but it's done by looking at past performance. And it's within the framework of the current job description. And then it's based on the perspectives and the observations of the manager. So in contrast, coaching is about helping people develop and grow in the direction that they want to go. It's aspirational. It's based on the goals that the individual will set for themselves, rather than on some external standards like a job description or a list of competencies. Coaching gets the individual thinking about their future and planning for the long term. And it's really centered on the individual, allowing and encouraging them to set the direction rather than the coach setting the agenda. Coaching is also about putting the individual in charge of their own development by helping them to identify their own goals and then to work towards reaching them. So let's see some specific ways in which coaching differs from providing feedback. Feedback, as I mentioned, is about past and maybe current behavior, while coaching is about future behavior. Feedback is corrective. It's aiming to fix things that didn't go well. Coaching is really preparative. It's preparation for what may come in the future. Feedback focuses on adjustment of current performance and behavior, and coaching is more focused on possibilities. Feedback is scrutiny-oriented. It's about comparing the individual to some sort of external measure, whereas coaching, on the other hand, is inquiry-oriented, using questions to explore potential. And we're going to look at this in more detail a little bit later on. Feedback is more about helping employees to not fail. I was kind of surprised when I read this. I was like, oh, that's a little stark. But in some cases, I think it's reality. And in contrast, coaching is about helping employees to reach their goals for the future. It's really about helping them to grow. Now, both coaching and feedback are about helping employees succeed, though they go about it, I think, in different ways. Feedback is intended to make sure that employees meet the expectations of the employer, whereas coaching can guide employees in the direction that suits them best, right, regardless of their current employer. So bottom line, feedback is a management tool, while coaching is more of a professional development tool. All right, so we've talked a little bit about what coaching is, so now I'm going to stop talking, and I'm going to ask you a question and ask you to use the chat panel to respond. So why offer coaching? What are the benefits that coaching can bring? So again, on the left, I see several of you are typing now. So I'll wait for some of those to come in. Why is coaching important? What are some of the benefits? What could your Vista members get out of it? What could you get out of it if you could get coaching? Let's see, AJ says it helps the Vista realize that there is more growth possible. Absolutely. Sometimes, you know, that adage, we don't know what we don't know, and sometimes it helps to have some other perspective to help us see what else is out there, what else could happen. It helps a Vista focus on a goal. Absolutely. It can be empowering. Thank you, Allison, for that. Coaching can help change behavior and allows room for people to grow. Absolutely, Renee. Let's see. It can provide Vistas with a sense of direction on where they're making progress and where they could improve. It's positive reinforcement rather than focusing on the negative. Yeah, thank you, Rebecca. Oh, and Ashton, I like this. Coaching allows for a leader's own growth as well. A leader who's willing to learn will be more effective, compassionate, and much, much more. Agreed. Yeah, and Dacia says it can bring success in future careers, looking at attitude, self-worth, behavior, etc. Yeah, so it's not just focused on what you're doing right now, but it has that long-term. Great ideas. If you have others, feel free to keep typing them in. Yeah, and we'll keep taking a look at those. These are great responses. So thanks for participating in this activity. I've got a slide, or two actually, prepared. So let's move on. So as we saw in your responses so far, there are, of course, lots of good reasons to offer coaching. Otherwise, we probably wouldn't talk about it. So I want to look at some of the benefits that have been identified by folks who focus on this and really have studied it, and look at them for the individual who's being coached, as well as benefits for the organization where that person is working or serving. You've mentioned some of these, but let's see what else there is. So first up, here are the benefits that an individual can gain from coaching. As you see, coaching can bring about enhanced energy and job satisfaction, increased personal productivity, which can boost confidence. Coaching can help individuals develop their problem-solving and decision-making skills, and those can be applied independently to other situations. And likewise, gains in knowledge or skills, as well as learning about themselves and their own learning needs, can be an important asset for further future career development. I forget who mentioned that earlier. And coaching sessions can develop better communication skills in the individual, which can then lead to better work relationships. The individual can get practice and guidance in self-management, which is another important skill in their own work history and their own career development. And finally, the reflection that happens during coaching can give the Vista a more meaningful service experience. So we've got also some benefits for the organization where the person is working or serving. So as you can see, some of these are parallel to the ones we just looked at, like increased productivity. But if you think about it, an organization with individuals who have increased personal productivity is going to benefit from that by having a greater overall productivity for the project or the organization. As we've said, coaching is about developing people, so it gets them thinking of the future, the long term, and focused on their professional development. And in the process, they can become more self-aware and learn to reflect and engage in powerful conversations, which can make them more effective employees or more effective workers or members, service members, Vistas. So the organization benefits by having proactive members who can think about the long term and who are career-oriented, you know, rather than those who are like just here to do a job. Let's see, as we saw earlier, coaching can help members have greater satisfaction and more meaningful service experiences, and that can lead to greater retention. Vistas who feel listened to and heard and supported in meeting their goals, whether those are personal or professional goals, they're going to be more likely to stay with the program. It's just human nature that when people are supported in getting what they want or developing and growing, they're going to stick around. So that can be an important piece because retention is something that comes up as a challenge for many of our VISTA sponsors. And then in organizations where coaching is integrated into the leadership, it can really change the culture. It becomes a coaching culture where people don't feel like if they make a mistake, they're going to get penalized. It leads to a more trusting and more positive and a more engaging culture. And that's where, again, it could help with retention. So you can see lots of benefits to coaching, which might make it a worthwhile activity for you if it's not already part of what you're doing. All right, so now that we've defined coaching, we've distinguished it from management, let's talk about what the coaching process entails. We're going to take a high-level look at some of the important aspects of the coaching process, and then there's some additional resources on the handout that'll give you more detail. So first up, I guess we should talk about when do you use coaching? When do you manage and when do you coach? And how do you navigate that line? So I'll use an example here. Let's say you've got a big report that's due for a funder. It's due in a few days, and you need help with research and writing, creating artwork or charts or graphs, whatever. Basically, you need everyone on the team engaged in specific ways. So that's a situation, of course, where you're going to use your management skills, your delegation and project management. And then after the process, after the report's submitted, you're going to do some reflection. And let's say you realize that one of the VISTAs on your team didn't really perform very well. They didn't come through on their part of the project. So of course you'd set up a time with that VISTA to talk about what happened, and you'd share your feedback, right? What the expectations were, what went well, what didn't go so well, and what the VISTA could do differently next time. So that's feedback, and it's still part of your management hat, right? The management approach. But sometimes later, that VISTA might come back to you and say, you know, I've been thinking about what you said, and I really want to work on this. Can you give me some suggestions? And then that's where you would put your coaching hat on. So the bottom line is you use coaching when the individual is ready and open to it. Just like it's really hard to teach someone who doesn't want to learn, it's really difficult to coach someone who isn't interested in being coached. Coaches use active listening techniques to figure out when people are ready to identify a problem and to find solutions. And some cues that someone's open to coaching could be things like, can you help me think things through? Or, I'd like to bounce some ideas off of you. Or, could you give me a reality check? And, you know, basically if someone comes and says, hey, I need some help, that could be a great opening for you to do some coaching. All right, so as I said, we're going to talk about the coaching process here. Coaching usually starts with a one-on-one conversation, face-to-face if possible, but if not, you can certainly do coaching by phone. You might begin with some kind of an assessment, like if you're going to do a bigger, more formal coaching, it might have some kind of an assessment, like the communications assessment that we have for leaders, or some kind of a worksheet with listing out their goals. And that could be helpful to give you a sense of where they want to go and also help them identify for themselves where they want to go. Also identify like what their personal strengths are and what priorities they have. So that helps to give a, put together a plan and to think about what the outcomes are from the coaching, what it is that you might want to achieve. The coaching, coaching is usually spread out over several sessions, but it doesn't have to be. Life coaches, you probably see them advertised around. Life coaching, it's usually like a 3-month process or longer. But coaching can happen in really short increments too, short conversations. It doesn't have to go on a long time. The goals and outcomes, of course, can change over time because as the individual starts to work through the process, they're going to achieve some of the goals that they set for themselves, and then they can move on to other things. But at least in the beginning, you're going to want to work with the individual to set up a goal to start with so that they've got something to work towards from the very beginning. So what are a coach's responsibilities? First off, you need to really listen to people, and that way you can help them discover and clarify what it is that they want to achieve. And often that takes inquiry, asking questions and being curious. So you want to encourage your vistas on a path to self-discovery. Ultimately, coaching is not about giving people the solution, but it's helping them to find the solution themselves. Using that approach is going to make it more sustainable because it becomes part of who they are and it's going to stay with them longer. So as a coach, you want to help them become self-generating and self-correcting, building within them the skills so they can start doing this on their own. Also, you want the person you're working with to be responsible and accountable for the outcomes. So the coach is supporting and challenging the person to reach their goals. So let's look at some core competencies of a coach. ICF, which is the International Coach Federation, has outlined 4 competencies for a coach. These are the 4 key things that a coach has to be able to do well. So setting the foundation begins when you sit down the very first time with someone. It's about setting a goal and a time frame and a process for the coaching experience. But it's also a part of each coaching session. So each time you meet and have a conversation, you're going to start out with what's our goal for today? What are we going to talk about now? And then setting a time frame for that particular conversation. The relationship is a partnership because both the coach and the individual being coached have the same goal, and that is the success of the individual. So here is again where it differs from the typical supervisor-employee interaction, because often with a supervisor and employee, it's getting the employee to do what the organization needs to have done. And here it's about what the individual wants, what the employee or the VISTA member, whoever it is, wants. And both parties are responsible for making the relationship work. So that's the co-creating part of the relationship. In the third competency about communication, a coach needs to communicate really effectively and facilitate a conversation with the individual that's being coached. And of course, there are lots of skills and tools related to communication. We're going to look at just a few a little bit later on. And then fourth is facilitating learning and results. And that's a process of challenging the individual to reflect and develop some new insights, to set goals, and to take action to reach those goals. So with this competency are things like reflection, planning, maybe motivation and support to help keep them going or get them going, as well as accountability and celebration. So these are the competencies of a coach. Now let's look at how they get put together. So these are 3 critical components of the coaching process, the 3 Ps. These are things that the coach brings to the conversation. It's how the coach creates an environment for the coaching to take place so that the individual can make progress. It's presence, perspective, and powerful conversations. Those are the 3 Ps. We're going to take a look at each one of them and see how they get integrated into a coaching session. So presence can be something that's a true gift to people, especially in this age of multitasking and constant digital distraction. Presence is really important. So a coach has to listen with a laser-like focus. You can't let anything else interfere with that. True listening allows people to feel validated and heard and honored. So they're more likely to open up and talk about some of the things that they really want to work on. As a coach, you want to listen carefully so that you hear what's being said, but also notice what's not being said. You want to focus solely on the individual's agenda, right, not on your own. And you need to help the individual get to the source of a problem rather than getting stuck on talking about the symptoms. So laser-like focus, as if there's no one else in the universe, that is presence, and that's the place to start. Perspective is a way that you can mirror for your vista so that they can gain another point of view. So as you're listening to what they're saying, you want to mirror back to them how it comes across. This is active listening, right? And this is going to allow them to see the situation from a different point of view and perhaps gain new insights on the situation. And in doing this, it's helpful to point out their strengths, always being focused on the positive aspects of the individual. This component's really useful when someone gets stuck and they can't see their way out of the current situation. You want to encourage them to see and consider other points of view and other possibilities. But you want to do that without telling the person what they should do. You want to stay away from advice giving. The goal is instead to get them thinking creatively about new possibilities and to help reframe their mindset and get them unstuck. So that's perspective. And the third is powerful conversations. A big piece of this is the power of inquiry. You have to ask questions. You've got to be curious. Remember, the goal of coaching is to help people determine their own solutions and to become self-generating and self-sustaining here. And questioning is a big part of what a coach does. The coach asks questions with the intention of helping the individual to get clarity about where they are, where they want to go, and how they can get there. It's not so much that you, the coach, needs the answers. It's that answering the questions is going to help the individual to figure out what it is that they need to do. So that involves asking the right questions. What might be a profound and powerful question that you could ask to unlock the other person's wisdom and potential? What question might empower them? Or what might help put the burden of discovery back on them? In coaching, a lot of times the person will ask the coach, what do you think I should do? And I'm sure you've had vistas come to you with the same question. And in coaching, the coaching's role is not to tell people what to do, but through listening and mirroring and asking questions, to give them a different perspective and help them identify the answers from within. Using this approach, the person then owns what they come up with. It's theirs. All right, so that's perspective. Let's take a look at some specific questions that you could use in coaching. So here's some examples of questions that illustrate what's sometimes called the power of inquiry. What would you do if you had unlimited resources? How much energy are you willing to put into that? And what are you trying to prove to yourself? So these questions, they're probing, they're thought-provoking. There's no simple answer to these. The idea is, to get the person really thinking and thinking. And so when you ask these kinds of questions, it's okay to have a period of silence. As a coach, you've got to get comfortable with silence, so that makes space for the individual to consider the question and then come up with their response. As a coach, you then need to listen really carefully whenever the response does come, using, again, that power of presence. Resist the urge to jump in with suggestions. As tempting as that might be, remember, you want the answer to come from the VISTA member or the person that you're coaching. Let's see. Oh, here's some more questions that I think are helpful. Is what you're doing helping you to follow your joy? There's a lot of talk about joy these days. And when will you start? That can be, it's like a very simple question, but it really puts that accountability and the responsibility firmly with the individual. So again, good questions here. Let's say you've got a VISTA member who's got some issues with motivation. They just can't really get going with the project or with what it is they're supposed to be working on. So in a case like that, you could ask, what small step can you take right now to get started? Because usually once you get a person moving, even like a small step, then they'll take the next step and the next, and then they'll have some momentum. And once you get the momentum going, then you might find there's some motivation there once they've got a little bit of energy. It's getting them unstuck. Another question that a coach can ask every single time, the one I just mentioned, when will you start? By when will you have something done? Like I said, a coach has to hold the individual accountable for their own plans. As a coach, you can also say, what can I do to support you to get to that? So that you're not just sounding like the taskmaster of get it done and by when, but you're there to support. So a question like that, what can I do to support you, creates that balance of I'm challenging you, but I'm also here to help. All right, so here's another chance for you to share your ideas using the chat. And I'm curious to know what you think is a powerful question that you could use in coaching your VISTAs. So again, use the chat there on the left side of the screen. Of course, we've looked at a bunch of questions that you could use in a coaching situation. Did any of those that we've previously looked at stand out for you? Or are there other questions that you find are particularly powerful that you could, or maybe you have already been asking your VISTAs? All right, so I can see a couple of you are typing. All right, here we go. So Amy shares, what did you do recently that you consider a success? What did you do to make that success happen? So those are great. It's focusing on the positive, which was mentioned earlier, and it can help shift their thinking. Instead of like, hey, I'm stuck, it's like, oh yeah, I guess I am competent. I do know how to do things. Leslie says, what is the bigger picture? Great. Let's see, Stephanie asks her VISTAs during the one-on-ones, why do you serve? And she says it's led to a lot of good conversations about who they are, where they're coming from in their service. That's terrific. Rebecca shares, what is your dream for this organization and how can you help to make it happen? Great, so very aspirational, big, get them out of being stuck in the minutia, get them focused on that dream. AJ says, how does your current task add to your professional development? Right. So again, it's connecting the individual or the granular to the bigger picture. Are you being true to yourself in this situation? What can you learn from this? These are all great questions. Thank you. Let's see, Ashton. To a Vista with hesitation about something, what's the worst that you think could happen if you do blank? I find that once people start to say it out loud, they realize it's not as scary as it was in their head. Absolutely, that's a great one. It's sort of like, there's a big monster in the closet. Well, let's open the door and turn on the light. And of course, once you do that, the monster turns out to be not much at all. Stephanie, how do you see this agency can serve the community better? Yeah, so that kind of question is focused on the organization and the agency, which might not have as much of an individual focus. It might not be, say, if I'm your Vista member, it might not be my goal or my hope or wish or what I'm trying to work on and develop. But those are good questions to help connect what they're doing to the bigger purpose and the bigger cause and help them see the importance and relevance of what it is that they're doing. So those are good. What else? What are some things that you have tried in the past to understand where they are in the process? Great, great, Allison, thanks. All right, so if you've got other questions, feel free to type them in. Otherwise, you've come up with a really great list, and we'll add those to the ones that I shared before. All right, let's go ahead and move on. Thank you for sharing your ideas with your colleagues here. All right, so some of you mentioned already that you've been doing some coaching, but maybe some of you have not yet had a chance to try that out. So let's take a look at some models of coaching to give you just an example or a structure or a format that you could use in setting up coaching sessions with your Vistas. There are lots of different models out there. We're just going to look at a few. So let's start with a model that's fairly easy to remember, and yet it can be really effective. It's the GROW model. So you start, the letter G is for goal. You start by getting the individual to set a goal, and you would ask, what do you want? What is it that you want to accomplish? What do you want to achieve? Where do you want to go? The R is for reality. It's getting a sense of what's happening now for the individual. O is for options. So this is a brainstorming period. It's getting the individual to come up with ideas that they could act on. And here you would ask questions like, what could you do now? Or what could you do the next time? If they seem set on one specific course of action, you might ask something like, what other options could you consider? Or what are the pros and cons of the option that you're currently considering? If your person seems like they're stuck, you could ask questions like, if there were no obstacles, what would you do? And so you would work through getting them to identify options, right? You want to get as many or, a really solid number so that they have considered it carefully. And then once they've identified several options, you can use other questions to get them to narrow down the choices. So it's like classic brainstorming kind of approach. You could ask them, what are the pros and cons of these options that you're considering? And the W is will. So this is the planning and accountability piece. What will you do and by when? So here you're trying to get a commitment from the individual to take action on one or maybe more of the options that they identified earlier. Again, coaching can happen in small or large bits. It could be an hour session. It could be 15 minutes. With this model in particular, you could focus on one specific concern and have an effective coaching session in a really short period of time. Remember to keep that laser-like focus of presence, to provide some perspective and reflection, and to ask the right questions in a powerful conversation to make it effective no matter how long the coaching session is. Another easy model to use is the 7 gears process for your coaching session. And as a coach, imagine that you're the chauffeur, like the driver of every coaching conversation. Maybe you're the Uber driver and your client's in the back seat. Your client tells you their desired destination, and with your questions and your observations, you drive them on their chosen route to get them to the goal. The conversation itself, the vehicle, it has a manual transmission, and so each gear represents the different stages of the conversation. Just like with driving, you're not always going to move consecutively like first, second, third. You'll probably shift up and down again as you go through the process. So we'll look at these. First gear is to find agreement. This is the gear where you always get started. To help things get moving, you ask some simple sort of logistical questions like, does this time still work for you? Do you feel ready to talk? So that's that foundational piece, right? The second gear, in this model they call it moving into heart space. So now that the logistics and the foundational stuff is out of the way, you're ready to help your client, your Vista, to start speaking honestly, moving from a logical head space to speaking from heart space about the things that really matter. You could ask questions like, what are some highlights since our last conversation? Or what's on your mind today? What is it that you really want to talk about now? Or say, how did you do with your goal from last week if you're doing this on a regular basis? The third gear they call finding the fire. So by now you're picking up speed. You're looking closely for what's going to be most meaningful for that person in this conversation. And you're going to ask questions that reveal the things they really care about. You know, what fires them up? Discovering their motivations and their values. So you could say something like, out of everything we've just talked about, what matters most to you today? Or what change would make the biggest difference for you right now? In the fourth gear, you're going to write down key words. So it's write words. So in this step, you're going to confirm the goal that the person has shared, and you want to do it in their own words and write it down. The point of this gear or this stage is to write down the right words, but you got to use the person's own language about their goal. So you could use questions like, if you could tell me your goal of our conversation today in just a couple words, what would it be? Or, the key phrase I'm hearing from you is blank. How well does that describe your goal? So you want to use reflection and questioning there, but then it's important to write them down so that you've got a clear record of that. It'll be a nice milestone to work from. Fifth gear, this is the highest gear, is to design action. So all the other gears focused on getting clarity, but now it's time to really plan and design action based on what you wrote down in the fourth gear. So some questions here are, what's the smallest, most realistic step that you could take this week towards reaching this goal? You know, what could you do today? How confident are you that you can achieve this goal? And maybe what support do you need in getting it done? There are a couple other gears that are listed here. There's neutral. And just like with a stick shift car, you know, every time you go from one gear to another, technically you have to go through neutral. So in a coaching conversation, as you shift from one to the other, you always want to check in with the person you're coaching and make sure they're ready to move on or make sure they're ready to make the shift. And then, you could ask some simple questions like, how are you feeling? Are you getting what you need from this? You ready to move on? The reverse gear is about changing course. At some point in the conversation, the individual could express doubts about themselves, or the direction of the conversation, or even their bigger goal. So in that case, you want to switch into reverse gear, sort of backing out a little bit out of this negative place. You'll use direct but gentle questions to help reframe their thinking about it. How true is that really? Or what are some other ways of thinking about the situation? And I think it was Ashton who said, what's the worst thing that could happen? To try to deflate some of their fear or some of the resistance that they might be experiencing. Another question, what could you change right now that would make you feel better? So this 7 gears process, I've given you a really simple view of it, is nice because it gives you this kind of standard format. It's repeatable structure that you can use again and again, but it also is fluid. You can move as you need to, so that you've got a natural and sort of fluid coaching session. All right, we've got one more model to look at. This is the emotional intelligence model, or the EI coach model. And you're probably familiar if you've read about emotional intelligence. It focuses on the emotional responses and the motivations of individuals. This model uses EI coach as an acronym to help remember 7 areas that you want to cover in the coaching session. You'll start to see a pattern emerge among these 3 models. And another little hint, they go back to those competencies that we looked at way early in the session. So with EI coaching, it begins by checking in on an emotional level. How are you feeling today? Then connecting on the intellectual level. What do you want to talk about? What do you want to achieve? The C is for current, what's going on right now. The O, opportunity, what possibilities are available. A is for action, what are you going to do? The C is a change measure. In this one I like it. It hasn't really come up this explicitly in the other models. What difference will this make? How will you know success? So how will you know you've actually accomplished what you've set out to do? And then with H, it's how are you feeling now? It's kind of this emotional barometer. It brings us back full circle to checking in on an emotional level. So that's a really quick overview of the emotional intelligence model. There's an expanded version of this in the handout in case you're interested. All right, so just a couple thoughts on using a model. We looked briefly at 3. There's, as I mentioned, a lot more. But whichever model or approach you use in coaching someone, a few things to keep in mind. First is to remember the 3 Ps, right? Presence, that's the laser-like focus, perspective, reflecting back, and the powerful conversations, that is using powerful questions to guide the conversation. You'll want to make yourself some sort of note cards or a template or something with the prompting questions to guide you, at least until you get really familiar. It's okay to have a list of questions in front of you, especially when you first get started coaching. And if you format your questions into a kind of template, then it's really easy to jot down a few notes about each piece. It's not so much like a transcript of the conversation. It's just, capturing a couple of key points around each one so that you've got a nice record later on, and you can see the progress that you've made from one meeting to the next, or you can remember, what a person has said, that they were going to accomplish, and you can check back with them on their goal. You don't want to be writing too much, especially if you're in a face-to-face meeting. You want your eyes, to connect with the person. You want to have that eye contact. and that will really help you keep that presence. After the coaching session, you want to take some time yourself to reflect on your performance, on your part of the coaching experience. Coaching takes a lot of self-reflection and a lot of constantly looking inward at yourself and asking, how did I do? Did I listen carefully? Did I pay attention to their agenda? Did I ask good questions? All of that. So that's the reflection piece for yourself. All right, we've got one more question for you. This is one that I hinted at the beginning. From what we've heard, from what we've talked about, is there a specific action that you might take as a result of this webinar? Is there one thing that you heard that you think you could apply, that you could implement with your VISTA members? All right, and I see several of you are typing at once. All right, let's see. Leslie says more structured active listening, less winging it and giving advice, or advice giving. Great. All right, so if you learned one thing, that's an awesome thing to have learned. Thank you for sharing, Leslie. Ashton says asking questions instead of giving advice. Okay, so there's a theme emerging here. Create a process and having questions to ask. Great, Elena. And on the advice topic, I'll say there are times, in your leader role where you need to give advice, where someone needs direction, where they need clear instruction or direction on what it is they're doing. So don't, if they have no idea what they're doing, is completely unfamiliar, if it's a technical thing, don't make them fumble around and guess about something they can't know. But when it's something about like, hey, what should I do? Should I go to graduate school? Should I look for a job? Like, it's very tempting for people to ask you to tell them what to do in those situations. But of course, you don't know what they're supposed to do, right? Only they can figure it out. So I'll just mention that distinction there. All right, so a couple other things have come in while I was talking. Holding people accountable. What and when will you do this? Yeah, so thank you, Allison. When should I follow up with you? Those are great. Let's see. Daisha says, start using the EI coach model when I'm meeting with them at our monthly meetings. I just started, and I think this model will help because we're a team. Awesome. AJ, remembering to keep quiet even if there's an awkward moment of silence. Absolutely. And the thing is, when you stay silent, the awkwardness is equitable, right? It's shared evenly among everybody in the conversation, and then that puts the responsibility for around everyone. So, yeah, just get comfortable with the silence. Rebecca says, I can ask them for what they want from their work and how they want to put it into practice. Absolutely. So it's getting them to take some responsibility and to set the agenda. And Stephanie, I'll try to refresh templates that the previous VISTA leader had in order to better fit the coaching strategies here. I want to be a better listener, and I have to agree with AJ, stepping back and listening more when necessary versus jumping in. Yeah, we're all helpers, and we've got ideas, we have experience that could be useful, so it's really tempting to want to just jump in. I do it myself all the time, and I still have to remind myself, like, hey, hold back, and let the other people have the opportunity. So you've got lots of company there. All right, well, I don't want to cut off your thoughts about this, but did you see what I did there? Almost like in a coaching session. I gave you this question. What is one action that you might take? So I just, not that this was a coaching session, but I just modeled a coaching question there for you. All right, so I want to move on. I just quickly show you some resources here. These are all listed on the handout that you can download from just below the slides. I'll just mention a couple of these. The first ones are on the Vista campus. You're probably familiar from when you started, and some of you are pretty new, so you're just recently have read about the 6 roles of a Vista leader. There are some materials under mentoring, or the mentor role, that can be useful in the coaching context. The other one there is a resource that was created by a group of Vista leaders. It's on guiding your members using the VAD. So it's that 365 Days of Vista. Here are some websites, organizations that I mentioned earlier, as well as the Kansas Leadership Center. They've got some free stuff that you can access, like, let's see, ICF. They've got a code of ethics, and anybody can access that for free. You don't have to be a member. And they've got a blog that's good. They've got some great articles on the blog. There are other materials. You have to be a member, a paid member, to get to them. Let's see, the CCL, the Center for Creative Leadership, they've got a lot of great stuff on leadership. Some of it's around coaching. A lot of it's free. They've got articles and podcasts, again, that you can get to for free. And the Kansas Leadership Center, they've got an online journal that I found helpful. So all those are on the handout. You don't have to write them down. So with that, I want to see if there are questions that you have that we can talk about as a group. I also want to mention that we've got a short little evaluation survey. I'd love to get your thoughts about this webinar and about other webinars that you might want, topics that you might want to see on other webinars. So you can see we've got the link is there at the bottom. I think we're going to try to slide that up a little bit so you can still get to the handouts. But you see the SurveyMonkey there. You've got to click on the SurveyMonkey link, and then that button at the bottom, the Browse To button, will light up, and you can click that, and it's going to, surprise, it's going to take you into the survey. But you can come back to the Adobe Connect window until you're ready to go do the survey. So thank you for, in advance, for putting your thoughts into the survey. All right, so let's see what questions you have. Again, you can use the chat. If you've got questions, you want to put them in there. If you've called in on the phone and you want to ask your question verbally, you can do that. I'm going to ask our producer, Jeff, to come on the line and tell us how that feature works.
Thanks, Andy. If you dialed into the webinar or had Adobe Connect call you back, you can ask questions using your phone. To do this, press *# and you'll be placed into the queue. When it's your turn to ask a question, you will hear the prompt, "Go ahead, caller." Then you may proceed with your question. Once again, to ask a question over the phone line, press *# to be placed into the queue. Back to you, Andy.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jeff. All right, so I see some things. A thank you note from AJ. You're welcome. Thank you. Elena, good question. Is there a version of this presentation for Vista supervisors? There's not yet, but that's a great suggestion. And I'll talk with my colleague, Eric Powell, who heads up our supervisor webinar series, and talk about how we might adapt some of this content for supervisors. All right, looks like we don't have any callers on the phone with questions, but I see a couple of you are typing. Elena says, please, amazing. I guess she's talking about training supervisors on coaching. Super. All right, so here's one from Rebecca. She says, how do you recommend starting monthly meetings with Vistas who may be resistant? I'm the first Vista leader at our organization, and some of my Vistas will not be excited about meeting. So, great question, and it can apply to lots of things that you do as a leader, particularly if you have Vista members who are serving there was no leader before, and you come in, and they could feel like, hey, you know, I was doing just fine without you. Who are you coming in and, you know, being all leaderly and telling me I got to meet or telling me I got to do this or that? So one of the things that I think you could do here is try to use some gentle questioning and some really keen listening to help understand what they care about, what their motivation is, and then you can frame the meeting as a benefit to them so that they'll see immediately what's in it for them. So it's like, hey, you know, Joe or Jane, whoever, you know, like whatever whoever your risk is, like, I'm curious to know what your biggest challenge is, or if there's one thing I could help you with, what would that be? Or, you know, what type of support or what would be most useful for you as you finish out your service or as you continue on with your project, you know, wherever they happen to be, and use that as the starting point for your meetings. Obviously, you'll have other things that you need to do in those meetings, right? You may need to be giving them updates and direction about the project. You may need to be giving them feedback about their performance or about what they've done. But you could use the coaching approach to help understand what they care about, what their needs are, what they want to accomplish, and then start by framing the meetings around that. And then they'll see like, oh yeah, this is good. This is something I wanted, and it's now going to, you know, this is the way I'm going to get it. Like in our weekly meetings, this is the place where I can get the help and support that I need. So that's a possibility that you can try. I'm going to ask your colleagues, others who are on the webinar, if you've got suggestions or ideas for Rebecca. Feel free to use the chat. And Ashton says, you know, following on this Rebecca's question, any better words, phrases to use than mandatory? So expectation, oh yeah, so Ollie mentioned expectation. That's a great one, and it's one that we use ourselves where we talk about, you know, for instance, Vista members are expected to blah, blah, blah. So it kind of keeps the clarity around, yeah, this is what we want you to do, but it gets away from the mandatory, because as soon as you lay down mandatory, then it becomes this back and forth like, oh, well, what's going to happen if I don't do it? You know, then it gets into consequences and it gets into escalation, which of course we would really want to avoid. Curious if others have thoughts about other than mandatory, expected. Let's see, Barbara says it can help to get members involved in meeting planning if that makes sense for your project. So great suggestion, Barbara. So back to Rebecca's original question, if your VISAs are resistant to the meeting, getting them involved in planning the meetings, you know, and setting the agenda. Once they get going, you could model how the meetings should work, and then rotate responsibility, like this week or this month. One person's going to be responsible for the agenda, someone else is responsible for the note-taking. So it gets more buy-in and more investment in the meeting itself. So great suggestion. And I see a few more of you typing. You know, one other thing that Vista leaders have done to make their meetings more appealing and to get participation and enthusiasm higher is to include celebration in each of the monthly meetings. So it's birthdays, and it's bringing in cupcakes or whatever to celebrate whoever's birthday is that month. Also doing some kind of little recognition or award, like the writing award of the month goes to so-and-so for this blog post or for this article that she wrote, or whatever, whatever would make sense for your team and what it is that they're working on. So Leslie says she agrees. Getting buy-in, making it their meeting can really help break down that resistance. Let's see, Ashton says, on my to-do list is creating a feedback form so my supervisor and I know what we're doing right and what can be improved, especially considering monthly meetings because my previous year had meetings just to fill time but were not helpful. All right, so that's great. Yeah, and again, I think this notion of having really a participatory process for planning the meetings, using a suggestion box or some other way that your VISTAs can submit their suggestions for meeting topics, what it is that they'd like to hear about, what they'd like to see covered. Obviously you're always going to have topics or items that you've got to cover because it's, what needs to happen for the project. But you can sort of sweeten the deal by adding things that your VISTAs are interested in. For a time here in VISTA headquarters, in our weekly meetings, we added a short little component around professional development, and we rotated, and each week somebody would come with just a little thing like, how to improve your health or how to focus or, something going on, sort of in current affairs. Just a little snippet about what's rural poverty looking like in Appalachia today. So a little 5-10 minute thing. It was kind of interesting. It was totally different from the rest of the meeting, but it was interesting, and it sort of sparked people's neurons in their minds and got them enthusiastic in different ways. All right. Any other questions about coaching, what we've talked about, what we've covered, the models? Not that you have to have any. All right, so I see a couple of you are typing some things in as well. Leslie says, I'm surprised at how engaged people get when you do an icebreaker with teams. Yeah, absolutely. That's a great reminder, to really attend to the personal, right, and to get people learning about each other, get them talking about what's important to them, and sort of setting the tone for the meeting and getting them engaged in a way right from the outset. So that can be great. All right, looks like we've got one more coming in. There was something else I was going to mention, and it slipped my mind for the second. Okay, so Marina's listed some of her favorite icebreakers. She's got a link there to a site. Terrific. Thank you for sharing that resource. The other thing I was going to say is, of course, we've got the discussion forums on the VISTA campus, right? And the open space forum for VISTA leaders. I've seen some of you participating there. Others want to make sure you're aware of it. And it's a great place to post questions like the ones you've had here, get input and suggestions from your colleagues about things they're doing that work, ideas they can share that might help you. if you've got a particular situation or challenge. So just want to do that little plug for the Open Space Forum on the Vista campus. All right, well, sounds like our conversation has come to a lull, so I'm going to wrap up here, and I want to leave you with a quote from Maya Angelou, and she said, "I've learned that people will forget what you said, people forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." So as we've seen, coaching is a strategic competence in leadership, and the ability to integrate coaching into your leadership is essential to having a lasting impact on the people you work with. So thank you all for participating. I hope you have a great afternoon.